President Trump's defense team will be back on the Senate floor tomorrow after previewing their arguments Saturday. Two main points we're likely to hear again. One, that Democrats are trying to tear up 2016 ballots and keep the president off the 2020 ballot, and that there is no evidence that the president did anything wrong.
One of the biggest questions is what still remains to be answered. Will the president's defense team do enough to convince moderate GOP senators to vote against new witnesses and evidence? We have with us Jenna Ellis. She's a constitutional law attorney and the senior legal advisor to the Trump 2020 campaign. Good morning to you, Jenna.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. You know, we are hearing, and we heard from Alan Dershowitz last night on Anderson Cooper. We're also hearing from others who are saying there is an expectation the Bidens are going to be part of this defense come Monday. Do you have any idea, give me, a percentage of how much they're going to lean on the Bidens for this defense?
Well, I think that, certainly we're going to see an argument and a robust argument from the legal team that is constitutional in nature broadly and then also specific to this instance. And so we're going to see from the legal defense team that the Constitution here provides that Article 2, Section 1 vests all executive authority in a president of the United States, not in anyone else in his subordinates, and certainly not 535 members of Congress. And so here there is a clear argument that the articles of impeachment fail on face because the abuse of power and obstruction of Congress simply aren't impeachable offenses. And then the legal defense team will also go into the specifics of this instance, which is that the uncontested facts here, that President Trump provided more military aid than the previous administration, including lethal aid, and within the fiscal year that it was appropriated for. And those are the uncontested facts. And so whether or not, how much they're going to rely on the Bidens, I'm going to leave that up to the legal team, but I think that you're going to see a very robust and articulate defense, not only of the constitutional law, but also the fact that President Trump simply did nothing wrong, and this absolutely is just the Democrats trying to campaign for 2020.
The legal standard begins and ends with the burden to prove the case failing. It's squarely on the Democrats. We know that, on the shoulders of House managers, that is. But I want to listen to what may be one of the most compelling points of evidence for Democrats in this case. Let's listen here to the testimony of President Trump's appointee, Ambassador Gordon Sondland.
Mr. Giuliani's requests were a quid pro quo for arranging a White House visit for President Zelensky. Mr. Giuliani demanded that Ukraine make a public statement announcing the investigations of the 2016 election, DNC server, and Burisma. Mr. Giuliani was expressing the desires of the President of the United States, and we knew these investigations were important to the President.
I think it's important to point out, he says he believes that the suspension of the aid package wouldn't occur until public statement from Ukraine, so not really decisive on that, but very decisive on the White House call and the White House visit. How do you argue that that's not an abuse of power?
Well, and so Shanlon also walked back his testimony, and he said that it was just his speculation and presumption. And the facts, the uncontested facts, are that there was no pressure on Ukraine. Both President Trump and President Zelensky have been very clear on the record about that. And the record also shows that President Zelensky and Ukraine had multiple meetings and calls without any announcement of an investigation or any advancement of that. And so the record and the uncontested facts are very clear that that's just simply false, and that's not true. And so while the Democrats are trying to manipulate the narrative into an abuse of power, and they're trying to create the facts that go into their narrative, the uncontested facts in the record are very clear that this simply didn't occur in the way that Gordon Sondland presumed, and his beliefs are just simply not true.
So there are some people that would say, witnesses would clear a lot of this up. President Trump has stated a couple of times that he's open to witnesses. Here's one of those moments.
I would rather go the long way. I would rather interview Bolton. I would rather interview a lot of people. The problem with John is that it's a national security problem.
What is your expectation for witnesses here, Jenna?
That will be fully up to the Senate, but the president's absolutely right that executive privilege and national security interests do need to come into play with this. And so if we look back at the Clinton impeachment, for example, no new witnesses were called before the Senate that were not already part of the House inquiry and had taken depositions. But what I find most interesting here is that the Democrats in their 24-hour presentation only talked about 17 witnesses. There was actually an 18th witness. That was Inspector General Michael Atkinson. And Adam Schiff has characterized that testimony as simply a briefing to keep it classified. But Representative Radcliffe, as well as the ranking member Devin Nunes on the House Intelligence Committee, has said that that testimony was actually very damaging to Adam Schiff for the inception of this House inquiry. And so the fact that Adam Schiff is not calling a vote to declassify that testimony and allow the Trump legal team access to that is very telling about what they're hiding. And so there is a cover-up, but that's actually Adam Schiff. That has nothing to do with President Trump here and any wrongdoing. So I think that that testimony absolutely should come forward because that was part of the House inquiry that we haven't seen. There was an 18th witness.
What we do know, though, witnesses are witnesses, so there will be witnesses on both sides if they are available. Jenna Ellis, we appreciate you being here. Thank you so much. I want to go to Shanlon Wu real quickly. Shan, your reaction to her arguments there.
Well, I think Jenna's position is very much the problem that the Trump defense team has, which is it's all well and fine to rely on constitutional notions like a presumption of innocence, but anyone who has done criminal defense work, and we're analogizing this to a criminal trial, they know you can't just sit back and take pot shots at the prosecution's case and rely on a reasonable doubt. That's a good way to get your client convicted. You must present a coherent theory of innocence. So they're spending a lot of time saying what the president did not do wrong. They need to present clearly what he did right. What was he legitimately doing here? And they're not presenting that. There are some hints of maybe what he was doing. There's some hints maybe the Democrats just have a bad motivation, but they haven't delivered that yet. And if they don't deliver that, while they don't have to worry about the president being convicted by the Senate, that's sort of a foregone conclusion, they'll acquit, they do have to worry about how that comes across to the American public.
All righty. Shan Wu, always appreciate your expertise, sir. Thank you.
Sure thing.